Okwe, Christian Weaver Nuwisawak. Hello, Christian Weaver is who I am. Did you know that prior to European immigration, there were 13 native nations or clans that existed on Long Island? Long Island is 1,400 square miles, and each nation had our own distinct territory. Within those territories were many, many sacred sites and burial grounds. Most of the nations were forced out of their territories by the Dutch and the English. My nation, the Shinnecock Nation, have existed on Long Island for over 12,000 years. That's over 10,000 years prior to first contact, and we still remain today, despite many attempts to extinguish our culture and spirituality. The town of Southampton was established within Shinnecock territory in 1640, and we've had a rough relationship with the townspeople ever since. Today, Southampton is a town inhabited by the super rich. People like Jerry Seinfeld, Calvin Klein, Christy Brinkley, Russell Simmons, the Kardashians, and many other very wealthy people call Southampton home. It's been hard at times to educate the non-natives of Southampton about the native history of the land. So, in 2001, we created the Shinnecock Cultural Center and Museum on our reservation. The Cultural Center and Museum not only educates natives and non-natives about our history, but also serves as a means of cultural preservation and is Shinnecock's headquarters for combating spiritual, land, and artifact crimes. The museum has many, many key elements that help us to share the uniqueness of our people. One of the exhibits explains that our original territory was much larger than what it currently is today. The exhibit explains that in 1859, some non-native New York investors forged a petition that broke a 1,000-year land lease from 1703. Despite Shinnecock tribal members' immediate objection, the legislature granted the sale of 3,500 acres to the investors. When the Shinnecock were finally able to bring the case to the Supreme Court, it was thrown out twice, citing the doctrine of laches. Another exhibit shows our unique whaling history. Shinnecocks were expert whalers. For thousands of years, we would create dugout canoes out of big trees. We'd call the canoes mashoons, and in each canoe we'd put 8 to 10 men, and we'd go out to the Atlantic Ocean and hunt for whales using harpoons and nets. When the non-native whaling businesses took off in the United States, there wasn't a whaling ship that went out of Sag Harbor that did not have a native on it. We were that amazing. Today, if you walk into the Shinnecock Museum, you will see some harpoons and nets that were used during those whaling days. Many of the artifacts found in the museum are made of wampum. Wampum comes from the quahaug clamshell. Looks like this. Shinnecock wastes nothing, so after we eat the clam, we'd use the shell and turn it into all kinds of things like tools or dishes or utensils. We'd even cut them into beads and use the beads for jewelry, like this. These beads were cut by my cousin, Gordell Wright. It takes a lot of time and patience to cut these beads, and they're worth a lot of money. For a long time, we would trade these beads with inland tribes like the Iroquois. That's how the Iroquois made the treaty belts that you'll find in the National Museum of American Indian. So for a long time, the Iroquois signified their treaties with the United States with these amazing elaborate belts made of wampum that were worth thousands of dollars. But because they're inland, they got the wampum from us and other coastal tribes. When the Dutch and English arrived, wampum became the first currency in the United States. The spiritual and religious exhibit tells the story of how Shinnecock Presbyterian Church, which is the oldest existing church on native land, was formed. Shinnecock have always had and a unique history and involve the earth, sea, and its inhabitants in our spiritual practices. When the missionaries called our spirituality pagan and sought out to change it, forming 13 prayer towns, they forced us into these towns where we cannot speak our languages, we cannot wear our traditional clothes, or pray our traditional prayers. This resulted in the forming of the Shinnecock Presbyterian Church. Thankfully, many tribal members still practice our traditional spirituality today. If you were to walk into the Shinnecock Museum today, you would walk in and notice that along the walls are many, many different black and white photographs of our ancestors. You might see a photograph like this, which was photographed probably in the early 1930s. This comes from our 4th of July parade that we do every year. And these are Shinnecock people. If you look very closely at this beautiful young lady right here, you'll notice that is my grandmother, Dolores Smith. She passed away, but she said it was very hot that day, and I'm very honored and blessed to have a copy of this photograph that you'll also find in the museum. One of the other really cool things that you'll learn about in the museum are about our burial ceremonies and our burial grounds. Across Long Island, there are many, many different indigenous burial grounds, and there are several within our Shinnecock territory. One of our most prominent burial grounds exists in what is now Shinnecock Hills Golf Course. Shinnecock Hills is one of the most famous golf courses in the world. So famous that the U.S. Open has been played there for several years and was just played there this past year. Unfortunately, it was built on our traditional land and traditional burial grounds. Shinnecock have a weird and unique history with this golf course, although that we feel that we've lost a bit of our culture with the course being built above our burial grounds. Many Shinnecock have played and worked that course over the course of its existence. As a matter of fact, my late cousin Peter Smith, who is Dartmouth educated, was the head groundskeeper at Shinnecock Hills Golf Course for many, many years. And I've had the honor of meeting random people, and after they find out that I'm Shinnecock, they ask me, "Hey, do you know Peter Smith? I played there one time and he was very gracious to me." And it's an honor to know that my ancestor has such a legacy despite the historical trauma within the golf course. Just a few days ago, actually this past Sunday, there was some construction that was going on within Shinnecock Hills off the golf course where they uncovered some human remains. We believe, the Shinnecock believe, that this is the remains of one of our tribal leaders from the 17th century. The person was buried with a glass flask, and we used to do that for some of our tribal dignitaries and tribal leaders. There's been some back and forth going on as it pertains to who the person really is. Obviously, the townspeople are trying to downplay it and say it is not a Shinnecock leader so that they can continue construction. But our tribal council, our tribal members, and the museum are undergoing a process to uncover who this person really is so that we can try and preserve our culture. Behind the Shinnecock Museum is our historical village. And in the historical village is a traditional wigwam and also a longhouse, two buildings that are historical to not only Shinnecock but other Algonquin peoples. The wigwams are dome places that were used as residential houses for usually single families, and the longhouse were usually used for multi-families and used for ceremonies. So we use this to educate not only our own community but the outside community about our history and how we existed. Many people think that all natives lived in teepees, where, well, obviously we know that's not accurate, and we do this to kind of educate people on who we really are as a people. You know, the Shinnecock Museum has done a great deal and a great service to kind of build the gap and educate the townspeople, the Southampton townspeople, about the culture of the land that they exist. And we're honored to do that. Thank you.